In the misty village of St. Mary's Mead, a priceless 12th century manuscript vanishes, and its keeper, Dr. Edward Langley, is found poisoned in his study. Enter Hercule Poirot, the master detective, whose little grey cells unravel a web of deceit woven by 3 suspects: a rival scholar burning with ambition, a desperate student hiding a secret, and a wealthy collector consumed by greed. As clues emerge, a smudged fingerprint, a crushed petal, a missing vial, Poirot, with Miss Marple's village wisdom, uncovers a deadly motive. Will the truth restore the manuscript, or will the shadows of Meadowbank Hall keep their secrets? Chapter 1. The Silent Study. The autumn mist clung to the hedgerows of St. Mary's Mead, shrouding the village in a veil of silver grey that muffled sound and softened edges. In the cosy drawing-room of Miss Jane Marple's cottage, a fire crackled in the hearth, casting a warm glow over the chintz armchairs and the delicate china teacup balanced in Hercule Poirot's gloved hand. The Belgian detective, impeccable in his pinstriped suit and polished shoes, sat opposite Miss Marple, whose knitting needles clicked rhythmically as she recounted the latest village intrigues: a squabble over church flower arrangements, a farmer's missing hen. Poirot listened with polite amusement, his grey eyes twinkling, though his mind, ever restless, yearned for a problem more suited to his little grey cells. "Mon ami," he said, adjusting his meticulously waxed moustache, "your village is charming, but its mysteries are, perhaps, too gentle for a man of my profession." Miss Marple's eyes sparkled behind her spectacles. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, you'd be surprised what secrets a village can hold. Human nature is the same, whether in St. Mary's Mead or London." Before Poirot could reply, the front door burst open, admitting a gust of damp air and a young man in a constable's uniform, his face flushed and his cap slightly askew. It was Constable Harrow, a lanky lad known to Miss Marple for his earnestness, if not his subtlety. He stood panting in the doorway, clutching a notebook as if it were a lifeline. "Miss Marple, sir. Begging your pardon, Mr. Poirot," he stammered. "There's been a terrible business up at Meadowbank Hall. Dr. Edward Langley. He's dead, sir, found in his study not an hour ago. And that manuscript he was always on about. It's gone." Poirot set down his teacup with a precision that betrayed his sudden interest. "Dead, you say? And a manuscript missing? This is no mere village squabble, Constable. Tell me, how was Dr. Langley found?" Harrow swallowed hard, glancing at Miss Marple, who nodded encouragingly. "Slumped over his desk, sir. No signs of a struggle. But his face, well, it looked like he'd seen the devil himself. Inspector Japp's up there now, and he sent me to fetch you, knowing you were visiting." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Inspector Japp, always in. Need of Poirot's assistance. Very well, Constable. Lead the way. Mademoiselle Marple, will you join us? Your insight into human nature may prove invaluable." Miss Marple tucked her knitting into a wicker basket, her expression one of quiet determination. "I wouldn't miss it, Monsieur Poirot. Dr. Langley was a peculiar man, and that manuscript was his pride. There's more to this than meets the eye." The trio set out into the mist, their footsteps muffled on the cobblestone path leading to Meadowbank Hall. The manor loomed ahead, its Georgian facade stern and unyielding, its windows like eyes watching their approach. Poirot's mind was already at work, cataloguing details: a death, a theft, a scholar's study. "The manuscript," he murmured. "What was its nature, Constable?" Harrow, striding ahead, turned slightly. "A chronicle, sir, from the Crusades. 12th century, they say. Dr. Langley found it in some dusty archive in Oxford. Worth a fortune, or so I heard at the pub." "Worth a fortune," Poirot repeated softly, his eyes narrowing. "And perhaps a life." As they reached the hall's heavy oak door, Poirot paused, his hand resting lightly on the brass knocker. "Constable, one question more. Who was with Dr. Langley last evening?" Harrow hesitated, then said, "He had guests for dinner, sir. Dr. Hale, his colleague, young Timothy Wells, his student, and Lord Carver, that rich fellow who collects old books. They were all there to see the manuscript, or so Mrs. Baines, the housekeeper, told me." Poirot nodded, his mind arranging the names like pieces on a chessboard. "A colleague, a student, a collector, each, perhaps, with a reason to covet this treasure. We shall see." The door creaked open, revealing the dim grandeur of Meadowbank Hall's entrance hall, where Inspector Japp awaited. The stage was set, and Hercule Poirot, with his unerring instinct for truth, stepped into the mystery of the silent study. Chapter 2. The Scene of the Crime. The heavy oak door of Meadowbank Hall closed behind Hercule Poirot, Miss Jane Marple, and Constable Harrow with a resonant thud, as if sealing them into a world where secrets clung to the very walls. The entrance hall was a cavern of polished marble and dark wood, its chandelier casting a feeble glow against the encroaching dusk. A grandfather clock ticked solemnly in a corner, its pendulum marking time with the precision Poirot admired. Inspector Japp stood at the foot of a grand staircase, his overcoat slightly rumpled, his expression a mixture of frustration and relief at the sight of the diminutive Belgian detective. "Poirot, thank heavens you're here," Japp said, mopping his brow with a handkerchief. "This is a nasty business, and no mistake. Dr. Langley, dead as a doornail, and that blasted manuscript of his gone. I've got the local lads securing the place, but we're in over our heads." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind engaging with the puzzle. "Mon cher Japp, you are too modest. But let us not delay. Show me to the scene of this tragedy, and we shall see what the little grey cells can uncover." Miss Marple, her shawl drawn tightly against the chill of the hall, nodded in agreement. "Yes, Inspector. Let us see where poor Dr. Langley met his end. I knew him only slightly, but he was a man of great passion for his work. Such passion can breed enemies." Japp led them down a corridor lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow the trio. The air grew heavier as they approached the library, where a constable stood guard, his young face pale. "In here, sir," he murmured, stepping aside. The library of Meadowbank Hall was a scholar's sanctuary, its high ceilings adorned with intricate plasterwork, its walls lined with shelves groaning under the weight of leather-bound tomes. A massive oak desk dominated the centre, its surface cluttered with papers, an inkwell and a single brandy glass, its amber contents untouched. Behind the desk, slumped at a high-backed chair, was Dr. Edward Langley, his head tilted at an unnatural angle, his eyes wide and unseeing, his face contorted in a rictus of agony. The room was oppressively still, save for the faint crackle of a dying fire in the grate. Poirot stepped forward, his polished shoes silent on the Persian rug. He surveyed the scene with the precision of an artist studying a canvas, his eyes darting from the body to the desk, the glass, the empty velvet-lined box that stood open like a wound. "Tiens," he murmured, "the stage is set, but the players have left their marks. Inspector, what do we know of the cause of death?" Japp gestured to a thin man in a tweed suit hovering near the fireplace, his bag of medical instruments open on a side table. "This is Dr. Grayson, the coroner. He's had a preliminary look." Dr. Grayson, a man with a perpetually furrowed brow, adjusted his spectacles. "Poison. I'd stake my reputation on it. The symptoms, constricted pupils, the grimace, the cyanotic tinge to the lips, point to something swift and lethal, likely cyanide. I've taken samples from the glass and the body for analysis, but I'd wager the brandy's the culprit. No external injuries, no signs of a struggle." Poirot nodded, his gaze fixed on the brandy glass. Its rim bore a single smudged fingerprint, barely discernible in the firelight. He leaned closer, careful not to touch, and noted a faint, powdery residue on the glass's edge, almost invisible against the crystal. "This glass," he said softly. "It tells a story, does it not? But the story is incomplete. The decanter? Where is it?" Japp pointed to a sideboard near the window, where a crystal decanter sat, half full of amber liquid. "There, Poirot. Mrs. Baines, the housekeeper, says Langley poured from it last night after dinner. The guests all had a glass, but only Langley's seems to have done him in." Miss Marple, who had been quietly observing from a corner, stepped forward, her eyes scanning the room. "The manuscript, Inspector," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "Where was it kept?" Japp indicated the empty velvet box on the desk. "Right there, Miss Marple. A 12th century chronicle, Langley called it. Found it in some Oxford archive, and he was crowing about it to anyone who'd listen. Worth a king's ransom, by all accounts." Poirot's eyes narrowed as he examined the box. Its hinges were intact, the lock unforced, suggesting it had been opened with a key or left unlocked. "The manuscript wasn't taken by force," he said. "This was a theft of opportunity, or perhaps premeditation. Tell me, Japp, who had access to this room last night?" Japp flipped open his notebook. "Langley hosted a dinner here, a sort of celebration for the manuscript's discovery. 3 guests, Dr. Margaret Hale, his colleague from the university, Timothy Wells, his graduate student, and Lord Reginald Carver, a bigwig collector from London. Mrs. Baines served the meal, and a footman, James, cleared up. They all left around 10, according to the housekeeper, but Langley stayed behind, said he wanted to work late." Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "Mrs. Baines is a reliable woman, Inspector, but even reliable people miss things. Did she see the guests leave the study, or only the house?" Japp frowned. "She saw them leave the dining room, but she was in the kitchen after that. James might know more, but he's a bit dim, if you'll pardon me saying so." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The dim, mon ami, often see what the clever overlook. We must speak with this James. But first, let us examine the room further." He moved with deliberate grace, his gloved hands hovering over objects without touching them. The desk held a scattering of papers, notes in Langley's cramped handwriting, diagrams of medieval script, a letter from an Oxford colleague congratulating him on the find. A fountain pen lay uncapped, a blot of ink staining a blotter, as if Langley had been interrupted mid-thought. Poirot's eyes lingered on the fireplace, where a single log smouldered, its ashes spilling onto the hearth. He knelt, inspecting the grate, and noted a tiny scrap of singed paper, its edges curled, but its text illegible. "Curieux," he murmured, retrieving the scrap with a pair of tweezers and placing it in an envelope. A clue, perhaps, or merely an accident. We shall see. Miss Marple, meanwhile, had wandered to the windows, their heavy drapes drawn back to reveal the misty gardens beyond. She touched the sill lightly, her fingers brushing a faint smudge of dirt. "Someone stood here," she said, almost to herself. "The earth outside is soft from the rain. If someone entered or left this way, there might be footprints." Japp, ever practical, dispatched a constable to check the garden, then turned back to Poirot. "What's your take, Poirot? Poison in the glass? Manuscript gone? Looks like someone had a grudge and sticky fingers." Poirot straightened, his eyes gleaming. "A grudge, perhaps. But the manuscript is the key. Its value is not merely monetary, but symbolic. To a scholar, it is prestige. To a collector, it is possession. To a student, it is opportunity. We must learn more of these three. Dr. Hale, Mr. Wells, Lord Carver. Each was here. Each had motive. Each had means." He turned to the sideboard, lifting the decanter's stopper and inhaling deeply. "Brandy, yes, but untainted, I think. The poison was in the glass alone. A precise act. This was no impulsive crime, Japp. It was planned, executed with care. The fingerprint, the powder, the open box. These are the threads of our tapestry." Miss Marple nodded, her knitting needles now still in her lap as she sat in a corner chair. "And the timing, Monsieur Poirot. The dinner was a public event, but the murder was private. Someone lingered or returned. We must find out who." Japp sighed, rubbing his temples. "Right then. I've got the suspects waiting in the drawing room. Want to have a go at them now, or shall we dig deeper here?" Poirot's eyes flicked to the brandy glass, then to the empty box, then to the singed paper in his envelope. "We shall speak with them soon, Japp. But first, let us ensure no detail escapes us. Constable Harrow, fetch Mrs. Baines and this footman, James. Their eyes may have seen what their minds did not." As Harrow hurried off, Poirot paced the room, his mind a whirlwind of the possibilities. The library, with its musty tomes and silent tragedy, held secrets he was determined to unravel. He paused by a bookshelf, noting a gap where a single volume was missing, its neighbours slightly askew. "Another clue," he said softly. "Or another distraction." Miss Marple watched him, her expression one of quiet approval. "You see the little things, Monsieur Poirot, just as I do. In a village, it's the misplaced teacup or the muddy boot that tells the tale. Here, it's the glass, the box, the ashes." Poirot inclined his head. "Precisely, mademoiselle. The truth lies in the details, and Hercule Poirot will find them all." Mrs. Baines, a stout woman with a starched apron and a weary expression, entered with James, a gangly youth who fidgeted under Poirot's gaze. "Sir, I don't know what I can tell you," Mrs. Baines began. "Dr. Langley was in high spirits last night, showing off that manuscript to his guests. I served the roast, poured the wine, and left them to their brandy. I didn't see the study after dinner." "And you, James?" Poirot asked, his voice gentle but probing. "You cleared the dining room. Did you enter the study?" James blushed, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Only to bring in the decanter, sir. Dr. Langley asked for it special, said he wanted to toast the manuscript. I left it on the sideboard and went back to the kitchen." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And the guests? Did any linger near the study?" James hesitated, then said, "Lord Carver, sir. He was in the corridor when I came out, looking at a painting. Said he was admiring the brushwork, but he was right by the study door." Miss Marple's knitting resumed, a soft click-click that seemed to underscore the moment. "Admiring a painting," she murmured. How curious. Poirot thanked them and dismissed them, his mind now racing. "The corridor, the painting, the decanter," he said to Japp. "We have a picture, but it is not yet complete. Let us see these suspects, Japp, and observe their faces. The guilty, they cannot hide from Hercule Poirot." As they left the library, the constable from the garden returned, his boots muddy. "No footprints outside, sir," he reported. "The ground's too wet, all churned up." Miss Marple's eyes met Poirot's, a silent agreement passing between them. The absence of footprints was a clue in itself, suggesting the crime was committed from within. The stage was set, the players named, and the game of truth and deception at on. Chapter 3. The three suspects. The drawing-room of Meadowbank Hall was a study in faded elegance, its brocade curtains heavy with dust, its mahogany furniture polished to a gleam that could not disguise the wear of years. A fire roared in the grate, casting flickering shadows across the faces of the three individuals seated there, each isolated in their own corner of the room, as if wary of proximity. Hercule Poirot entered with Inspector Japp and Miss Jane Marple, his sharp eyes taking in the scene with the precision of a watchmaker. The air was thick with tension, the silence broken only by the crackle of logs and the distant ticking of a clock. Japp, clearing his throat, addressed the group. "Doctor." "Hail. Mr. Wells. Lord Carver. This is Monsieur Hercule Poirot, a detective of some repute. He's here to assist in the matter of Dr. Langley's death and the missing manuscript. I'd ask you to cooperate fully." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache immaculate, his demeanour one of courteous authority. "Mesdames et messieurs, a tragedy has occurred, and a treasure has vanished. I seek only the truth, and the truth, it reveals itself through the smallest details. I will speak with each of you, but first I observe." Dr. Margaret Hale sat nearest the fire, her posture rigid, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. A woman in her early 50s, her greying hair was pulled into a severe bun, and her eyes, behind wire-rimmed spectacles, were sharp and unyielding. Her black dress, practical rather than mourning, suggested a mind preoccupied with function over sentiment. She met Poirot's gaze with a flicker of defiance, as if daring him to find fault. Timothy Wells, the graduate student, occupied a sagging armchair by the window, his lanky frame hunched as if to make himself smaller. His tweed jacket was frayed at the cuffs, his fingers stained with ink, and his eyes darted nervously from Japp to Poirot to the floor. A faint sheen of sweat glistened on his forehead, and his left hand twitched, clutching a crumpled handkerchief. Lord Reginald Carver lounged on a velvet settee, one leg crossed over the other, his silver-headed cane resting against his knee. His tailored suit spoke of wealth, his grey hair and aquiline nose of breeding, but his smile was too polished, his eyes too guarded. He toyed with a gold watch chain, the gesture casual yet calculated, as if to assert his ease in the face of scrutiny. Poirot's gaze lingered on each, noting the interplay of their silences. "Inspector," he said, "perhaps you will introduce them formally, and we shall learn what they saw last night." Japp nodded, flipping open his notebook. "Dr. Margaret Hale, Professor of Medieval History at Oxford, colleague of Dr. Langley for nigh on 20 years. Mr. Timothy Wells, Langley's graduate student, working under him for his doctorate. Lord Reginald Carver, collector of rare books and manuscripts, visiting from London. All three were at the dinner last night, celebrating the discovery of the 12th century chronicle. Miss Marple, seated unobtrusively in a corner with her knitting, looked up. "A celebration," she said softly, "yet it ended in death. How curious that joy should turn so quickly to sorrow." Dr. Hale's lips tightened. "It was no celebration for me," she said, her voice crisp. "Edward Langley was a showman, not a scholar. He paraded that manuscript as if he'd written it himself, ignoring my contributions to its authentication." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes bright. "You disagreed with Dr. Langley, madame. On what matter?" Her gaze flickered to the fire. "He claimed sole credit for the find, though I spent months verifying its provenance. He was careless, too. Kept it in that flimsy box, not even locked. I told him it was reckless." "Reckless," Poirot repeated, his tone neutral. "And yet, you dined with him. Did you see him after, in the study?" "I left at 10, she said sharply. "I had work to do at my cottage. I saw nothing." Poirot nodded, turning to Timothy Wells, who flinched under his scrutiny. "And you, Monsieur Wells?" "A student, eager to learn, non. What brought you to this dinner?" Timothy's voice was barely above a whisper. "Dr. Langley invited me. Said it was a chance to meet Lord Carver, maybe impress him for funding. I didn't stay long. I was nervous, you see. Dr. Langley wasn't happy with me." "Not happy?" Poirot's eyebrows rose. "Explain, s'il vous plaît." Timothy's hands twisted the handkerchief. "He thought I'd copied some work in my thesis. Said he'd fail me if I didn't rewrite it. I begged him to reconsider. But he was stubborn. I left early. Went back to my lodgings." Poirot's eyes narrowed, noting the bruise on Timothy's wrist, half hidden by his sleeve. "And the manuscript? Did you see it last night?" Timothy nodded, his eyes wide. "Dr. Langley showed it to us after dinner, in the study. It was beautiful. Parchment, gold ink. I didn't touch it, I swear." Poirot turned to Lord Carver, whose smile remained fixed. "And you, Monsieur le Lord? A collector of such treasures must have been enchanted." Carver's laugh was low, almost musical. "Enchanted, yes. That chronicle was a gem, unique, irreplaceable. I offered Langley a substantial sum for it, but he refused. Said it belonged to history, not a private collection. Noble, but foolish." "You were in the corridor," Poirot said, his voice suddenly sharp, "near the study, after dinner. Admiring a painting, I am told." Carver's smile faltered, but only for a moment. "Indeed, a fine Gainsborough, if I recall. I lingered to appreciate it. Langley was still in the study, alive and well." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, pacing slowly. 3 guests, 3 motives, perhaps. A rival, a desperate student, a thwarted collector. And yet, only 1 glass was poisoned, only 1 manuscript taken. The truth, it hides in the shadows of your words. Miss Marple's needles paused. "Monsieur Poirot, might I suggest speaking to Mrs. Baines again? Servants see things, even when they think they don't. And the footman, James, he was near the study, too." Japp grunted. "Good idea, Miss Marple. I'll have them brought in later. But Poirot, what's your game? You're circling like a cat with a mouse." Poirot smiled faintly. "The mouse, Japp, is the truth, and I am merely observing its tracks. Dr. Hale, your rivalry is noted, but your departure at 10 is unverified. Monsieur Wells, your fear of failure is compelling, but fear alone does not poison. Lord Carver, your desire for the manuscript is clear, but did it drive you to murder? We shall see." He turned to the door, then paused. "One thing more. The brandy glass. Did any of you see Dr. Langley pour it? Dr. Hale shook her head. He poured after I left. Timothy mumbled. I was gone by then. Carver shrugged. I saw him with the decanter, but I didn't stay to watch him drink. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing their responses. Very well. Remain here, if you please. Inspector, let us return to the study. There is more to learn from the silent witnesses. As they left the drawing-room, Miss Marple caught Poirot's eye. They're all hiding something, she whispered. Doctor. Hale's too controlled, Timothy's too frightened, and Lord Carver's too smooth. But the truth, Monsieur Poirot, is in their eyes. Poirot inclined his head. You are wise, mademoiselle. The eyes, they do not lie, even when the tongue does. Come, we have work to do. The trio returned to the library, where the air seemed heavier, the shadows deeper. Poirot's mind was a whirl of details. The smudged fingerprint, the powdery residue, the singed paper, the missing book. The three suspects, each with a motive, each with an opportunity, waited in the wings. But the stage belonged to Hercule Poirot, and he would not rest until the curtain fell on the truth. Chapter 4. The Colleague's Ambition. The conservatory of Meadowbank Hall was a glass-walled haven, its air thick with the scent of damp earth and blooming orchids. Sunlight, filtered through the autumn mist, cast a pale glow over the tiled floor, where Dr. Margaret Hale stood waiting for Hercule Poirot and Miss Jane Marple. Inspector Japp had remained in the library to oversee the constable's search for further evidence, leaving the detective and the village spinster to probe the first of the three suspects. Dr. Hale's posture was as unyielding as the iron trellises supporting the climbing vines, her arms crossed, her expression a blend of impatience and guarded reserve. Poirot, his patent leather shoes clicking softly on the tiles, offered a courteous bow. Madame Hale, thank you for meeting us here. It is a place of beauty, no? Yet even beauty can conceal shadows. I wish to understand your relationship with Dr. Langley and your movements last night. Dr. Hale's eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, met his without flinching. I've nothing to hide, Monsieur Poirot. Edward Langley and I were colleagues, not friends. We worked together at Oxford, studying medieval texts, but his ego outstripped his scholarship. That manuscript was as much my discovery as his, yet he claimed all the glory. Miss Marple, seated on a wicker chair with her knitting in her lap, looked up, her voice gentle but probing. It must have been galling, Doctor Hale, to see your work overshadowed. In my village, I've seen how resentment can fester, even in the quietest hearts. Dr. Hale's lips thinned. Resentment? Perhaps, but I didn't kill him. I'm a scholar, not a murderer. My battles are fought with citations, not poison. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes noting the faint tremor in Dr. Hale's fingers, the chemical scent clinging to her tweed coat, a trace of something acrid, not unlike the laboratory reagents he had encountered in past cases. Madame, you spoke earlier of Dr. Langley's carelessness with the manuscript. You said it was kept in a flimsy box, unlocked. Did you ever handle this box yourself? Dr. Hale hesitated, then nodded. Once, weeks ago, when we first catalogued the manuscript, Edward insisted on keeping it in his study, despite my objections. I suggested a safe, but he laughed it off, said no one in St. Mary's Mead would dare steal it. Yet someone did, Poirot said softly. And Dr. Langley is dead. Tell me, madame, what did you do after the dinner last night? I left at 10, she replied, her voice firm. I walked back to my cottage in the village. It's a short distance, and I needed to prepare for a lecture. I was alone, so— No, I have no one to confirm my whereabouts. Poirot's moustache twitched. A lecture? At such an hour? Your dedication is admirable. Did you see Dr. Langley after the dinner, perhaps in the study? No, she said sharply. I said my goodbyes in the dining room and left. The others were still there. Timothy snivelling as usual, and Lord Carver trying to charm Edward into selling the manuscript. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, a rhythmic counterpoint to the conversation. Dr. Hale, she said, you're a woman of precision. I notice your coat. There's a faint stain on the cuff, and a smell, like something from a laboratory. Do you often work with chemicals? Dr. Hale's eyes flickered to her sleeve, where a faint yellowish mark was barely visible. I'm a historian, Miss Marple, but I sometimes analyze old inks and parchments. The stain is likely from a reagent I used last week. Nothing sinister. Poirot stopped pacing, his gaze fixed on her. And cyanide, madame. It is a chemical not unknown to scholars, no? Easily obtained, easily concealed. Dr. Hale's face paled, but her voice remained steady. If you're accusing me, Monsieur Poirot, say it plainly. I had no cyanide, and I had no reason to kill Edward. His death doesn't give me the manuscript. It only delays my research. Poirot inclined his head, his expression unreadable. I accuse no one, madame, not yet. But the truth, it is like the orchid behind you. Delicate, yet it thrives in the right conditions. I will find those conditions. He turned to the glass wall, his eyes scanning the garden beyond, where the mist had begun to lift, revealing the sodden earth. One question more. Did you see anyone near the study as you left? Lord Carver, perhaps, admiring his Gainsborough. Dr. Hale frowned, as if searching her memory. I saw no one. The corridor was empty. But I wasn't looking. I was eager to be gone. Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her eyes thoughtful. Eager to be gone, she murmured. Yet you stayed for dinner, despite your dislike of Dr. Langley. Was there something you hoped to gain? Dr. Hale's jaw tightened. I stayed because Edward insisted. He wanted to parade his triumph before us all. I went for the manuscript, not for him. Poirot nodded, his mind cataloguing her words, her gestures, the chemical scent that lingered like a question mark. Merci, madame. You may return to the drawing-room. We will speak again. As Dr. Hale departed, her footsteps echoing in the conservatory, Miss Marple leaned toward Poirot. She's a proud woman, Monsieur Poirot, and pride can be a dangerous thing. That stain on her cuff, it reminds me of a chemist's wife in St. Mary's Mead, who once spilled a tincture that smelled much the same. Harmless, she said. But it wasn't. Poirot's eyes gleamed. You are perceptive, mademoiselle. The stain, the scent, they are threads in our tapestry. But are they threads of guilt, or merely coincidence? We must weave further. They stepped out of the conservatory, the damp air of the corridor a sharp contrast to the humid warmth they left behind. Poirot's mind was alive with possibilities. The chemical scent, Dr. Hale's unguarded moment of hesitation, her lack of an alibi. She was a woman of intellect and ambition, but was she a murderer? The little grey cells, as always, demanded more evidence. As they returned to the library to rejoin Japp, Poirot paused, his gaze falling on a small table in the corridor. A vase of wilted roses stood upon it, and beside it a single petal lay on the floor, crushed as if by a careless foot. "Curio?" he murmured, bending to retrieve it. "A petal, out of place. Like our Dr. Hale, perhaps?" Miss Marple smiled faintly. "In my village, Monsieur Poirot, a crushed petal often means someone passed in a hurry, or in secret." Poirot tucked the petal into his notebook, his expression one of quiet determination. "Then we shall follow the path of this petal, mademoiselle, and see where it leads. The colleague's ambition is clear, but the truth, it remains hidden for now." Chapter 5. The Student's Secret. The village pub of St. Mary's Mead, the Black Boar, was a low-ceilinged establishment with smoke-stained beams and a faint aroma of ale and roasted chestnuts. Its windows glowed with the warmth of lamplight against the gathering dusk, offering a stark contrast to the sombre grandeur of Meadowbank Hall. Hercule Poirot, accompanied by Miss Jane Marple, had chosen this unassuming venue to interview Timothy Wells, Dr. Langley's graduate student. Inspector Japp had remained at the hall to coordinate with the constables, leaving Poirot and Miss Marple to delve into the young man's nervous demeanour. Timothy sat at a corner table, his lanky frame hunched over a half-empty pint, his fingers drumming an erratic rhythm on the scarred wood. Poirot settled into a chair opposite, his impeccable suit a jarring note in the rustic setting. He adjusted his cuffs, his grey eyes fixed on Timothy with an intensity that made the young man shift uncomfortably. "Monsieur Wells," Poirot began, his voice smooth yet probing, "you are a scholar, a seeker of knowledge, non? Yet you sit here, trembling like a leaf in the wind. Tell me, what troubles you about last night?" Miss Marple, her shawl draped over her shoulders, took a seat beside Poirot, her knitting needles clicking softly as she observed Timothy with the quiet scrutiny of one accustomed to reading the secrets of village hearts. "You remind me of young Tommy Pierce from St. Mary's Mead," she said gently. "Always nervous, always hiding something. It's better to speak plainly. Mr. Wells?" Timothy's eyes darted between them, his knuckles whitening around his glass. I don't know what you want me to say. I didn't do anything. Dr. Langley was alive when I left the hall. I swear it." Poirot leaned forward, his moustache quivering slightly. "Let us begin with the facts, monsieur. You were at the dinner, invited by Dr. Langley to meet Lord Carver. You saw the manuscript, this treasure of the Crusades, and then you left early. Why?" Timothy swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. "I told you, Doctor. Langley was angry with me. He said my thesis was plagiarized, bits of it anyway. He threatened to fail me, to ruin my career. I couldn't stay there, listening to him gloat over that manuscript while my future was crumbling." Miss Marple's needles paused, her eyes soft but sharp. "Plagiarism is a serious charge, Mr. Wells. Was it true?" Timothy's face flushed, and he looked down at his hands, where a faint bruise marked his left wrist, partially hidden by his frayed cuff. "It wasn't intentional," he mumbled. "I was careless, used some sources without proper citation. I begged him to let me revise it, but he wouldn't listen. He said I'd disgraced him." Poirot's gaze lingered on the bruise, his mind cataloguing its implications. "This bruise, monsieur, how did you come by it? It is fresh, no?" Timothy tugged his sleeve down, his voice rising. "It's nothing. I bumped into a doorframe at my lodgings. Clumsy, that's all." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile, one that suggested he saw more than Timothy wished. "A doorframe, you say? Most curious. Let us return to the dinner. You left early. But did you go directly to your lodgings? Or did you perhaps linger near the study?" Timothy's eyes widened, and he shook his head vigorously. "No, I left the hall around 9:30, went straight back to my room in the village. Mrs. Cooper, my landlady, can tell you I was there. I didn't go near the study after dinner." Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression one of gentle skepticism. "Mrs. Cooper is a kind woman, but she keeps early hours. Did she see you return, or were you alone?" Timothy hesitated, his fingers twisting the handkerchief he'd pulled from his pocket. "She was asleep, I think. I let myself in quietly. But I didn't go back to the hall, I swear." Poirot leaned back, his hands clasped before him, his eyes never leaving Timothy's face. "The manuscript, Monsieur Wells. You said it was beautiful. Parchment, gold ink. A young scholar, desperate to prove himself, might see such a treasure as a way to redeem his mistakes. Did you touch it?" "No." Timothy's voice cracked, drawing the attention of a few patrons at nearby tables. He lowered it, leaning forward. "I looked at it, yes, when Dr. Langley showed it to us. But I didn't touch it. I couldn't." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And the brandy glass. Did you see Dr. Langley pour his drink, or did you perhaps handle the decanter yourself?" Timothy shook his head, his hands trembling. "I didn't touch the decanter. Dr. Langley poured the brandy after dinner, the study. I was already leaving by then. I saw Lord Carver and Dr. Hale still there, talking. I just wanted to get out." Miss Marple's knitting resumed, the soft click of her needles a steady undercurrent to the conversation. "You were frightened, Mr. Wells," she said. "And fear can make a person act rashly. In my village, I once knew a boy who stole a silver spoon, not for greed, but because he feared his father's wrath. Did your fear lead you to do something foolish?" Timothy's eyes filled with tears, but he shook his head again. "I didn't do anything. I didn't poison him, and I didn't take the manuscript. You have to believe me." Poirot studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "Belief, monsieur, is earned through truth. You are hiding something, I think. This bruise, this nervousness, it speaks of a secret. But for now, I will not press you. Return to your lodgings, but do not leave the village. We will speak again." As Timothy gathered his coat and hurried out into the misty evening, Miss Marple looked at Poirot, her eyes thoughtful. "He's a troubled boy, Monsieur Poirot. That bruise, it wasn't from a door frame. I've seen marks like that before, on a lad who'd been in a scuffle. And his fear is real, but is it fear of guilt or fear of discovery?" Poirot nodded, his fingers brushing his moustache. "You see much, mademoiselle. The bruise, the handkerchief, the haste to leave, these are pieces of our puzzle. Timothy Wells is a young man under pressure. But is he a murderer? The little grey cells, they demand more." They rose from the table, the pub's warmth lingering as they stepped into the cool night air. Poirot's mind was a whirl of details. The bruise, Timothy's stammering denials, his lack of a confirmed alibi. The student's secret was a thread in the tapestry. But whether it led to murder or merely to shame remained unclear. As they walked back toward Meadowbank Hall, Poirot paused, his eyes catching a glint in the grass by the path, a small tarnished button, half buried in the mud. He retrieved it with his handkerchief, examining it closely. "A button, mademoiselle, from a man's coat, perhaps, and near the path to Timothy's lodgings. Another clue? Or another distraction?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "In St. Mary's Mead, a lost button often tells a story, of haste, of struggle, or of carelessness. We must see where this one fits. Poirot tucked the button into his pocket, his expression one of quiet resolve. Indeed, mademoiselle, the student's secret is but one thread. We must weave it with the others, Dr. Hale's ambition, Lord Carver's desire, until the pattern of truth emerges. Chapter 6. The Collector's Desire. The London townhouse of Lord Reginald Carver stood in a quiet square, its Palladian facade a testament to wealth and taste. Hercule Poirot, accompanied by Miss Jane Marple, had travelled from St. Mary's Mead to confront the third suspect in the tragedy of Dr. Edward Langley's death and the theft of the precious manuscript. Inspector Japp had remained at Meadowbank Hall, overseeing the ongoing search for physical evidence, while Poirot sought to unravel the motives of the enigmatic collector. The butler, a stoic figure in black, ushered them into a drawing-room where crystal chandeliers gleamed and portraits of austere forebears gazed down with silent judgment. Lord Carver rose from a leather armchair, his silver-headed cane resting against its arm. His tailored suit was immaculate, his grey hair swept back, and his smile carried the polish of a man accustomed to command. "Monsieur Poirot, Miss Marple," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. "An unexpected pleasure. I trust you've come to discuss this unfortunate business at Meadowbank Hall." Poirot inclined his head, his grey eyes sharp and unyielding. "Indeed, Monsieur le Lord, a man is dead, a manuscript is missing, and you, I understand, had a great desire for this treasure. Let us speak plainly, for the truth, it does not hide from Hercule Poirot." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting in her lap, her eyes as keen as a hawk's, despite her gentle demeanour. "In my village, Lord Carver," she said, "I've known men who coveted rare things, old coins, a neighbour's roses. Desire can make one forget propriety. That manuscript was very dear to you, wasn't it?" Carver's smile did not waver, but his fingers tightened briefly on his watch chain. "Dear? Certainly. The chronicle was a masterpiece, 12th century parchment, illuminated with gold, a record of the Crusades unmatched in its detail. I offered Langley £50,000 for it, a sum he refused with tiresome nobility. He said it belonged to the world, not to me." Poirot paced slowly, his polished shoes silent on the Aubusson rug. "A generous offer, monsieur, yet you were seen near the study after dinner, admiring a painting. A convenient moment, perhaps, to linger where the manuscript was kept." Carver's laugh was low, almost amused. "You're a suspicious man, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, I admired a Gainsborough in the corridor. Fine brushwork, though hardly my focus. I spoke briefly with Langley in the study afterward, renewing my offer. He declined again, and I left. He was alive, I assure you." Poirot's eyes narrowed, catching the faint flicker of Carver's gaze toward a side table where a small glass vial stood, its label faded, but its contents a pale liquid. "This vial, monsieur," Poirot said, gesturing without touching. "It is a tonic, perhaps." "For your health." Carver's smile tightened. "A digestive aid, nothing more. My physician prescribes it for after meals. Surely you don't suspect me of carrying poison?" Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her voice mild but pointed. "In St. Mary's Mead, we once had a gentleman who kept a tonic much like that. Harmless, he said, until it wasn't. The smell, Lord Carver. Does it have a particular scent?" Carver's composure held, but he moved to the table, casually placing the vial in a drawer. "It smells of anise, Miss Marple. quite ordinary. You're welcome to inspect it, though I'd prefer you didn't rummage through my possessions." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "We shall not rummage, monsieur, but we observe. Tell me, what did you do after leaving the study? You returned to London, non?" Carver nodded, leaning back in his chair. "I took my car back to town, arriving around midnight. My butler can confirm my return. I had no reason to linger in that dreary village." Poirot stopped pacing, his gaze fixed on Carver's hands, which rested too deliberately on the armrests. "And the manuscript? A collector of your passion, denied his prize, might be tempted to take it by other means." Carver's eyes flashed, but his voice remained even. "I'm no thief, Monsieur Poirot, nor a murderer. Langley's death is a tragedy, but it's not my doing. I wanted the manuscript, yes, but I'd never stoop to violence." Miss Marple looked up, her eyes thoughtful. "You collect rare books, Lord Carver. In my village, I've seen how collectors can become possessive. Did you see the manuscript that night, in its velvet box?" Carver hesitated, then nodded. "Langley showed it to us after dinner, Hale, Wells, and me. He opened the box, let us admire it. I touched the edge of the parchment, felt its age. But I didn't take it." Poirot's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "And the brandy, monsieur? Did you see Dr. Langley pour his glass?" Carver shrugged, his nonchalance studied. "He poured from the decanter as I was leaving. I took a glass myself earlier, as did Hale and Wells. All perfectly fine." Poirot's eyes lingered on the drawer where the vial had disappeared. "Perfectly fine, you say, yet one glass was not. Merci, Monsieur Carver. You have been most illuminating. We will speak again." As they rose to leave, Miss Marple's knitting paused, her gaze catching a small detail, a faint scratch on the polished surface of the side table, near where the vial had stood. "A curious mark," she murmured, almost to herself, as if something was dragged across it in haste. Carver's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "An old table, Miss Marple. It's seen many careless hands." Outside, as they stepped into the London fog, Poirot's expression was one of quiet intensity. "The collector's desire, mademoiselle. It burns brightly. That vial, that scratch, they are not accidents. Carver is a man of control, but control can mask calculation." Miss Marple nodded, her shawl drawn against the chill. "He's too smooth, Monsieur Poirot, like Mr. Grayson in my village, who always had an answer for everything until his lies unravelled. That vial, I'd wager it's more than a tonic." Poirot tucked his scarf tighter, his mind racing. "We shall see, mademoiselle. The vial, the scratch, Carver's presence near the study. These are threads we must follow. The collector's desire is a powerful motive. But is it the motive for murder? The little grey cells, they will tell us." As they hailed a cab back to the station, Poirot's thoughts returned to the button found near Timothy's lodgings, the chemical scent on Dr. Hale's coat, and now the vial in Carver's drawing-room. The tapestry of the crime was growing, each suspect weaving their own pattern of secrets, and Hercule Poirot was determined to unravel it, thread by thread. Chapter 7. The Dinner's Shadows. The mist had thickened over St. Mary's Mead, cloaking the village in a ghostly shroud as Hercule Poirot and Miss Jane Marple returned to Meadowbank Hall. The grand manor loomed like a sentinel in the dusk, its windows glowing faintly, as if reluctant to reveal the secrets within. Inspector Japp awaited them in the dining room, where the remnants of last night's fateful dinner still lingered. a tablecloth slightly askew, a few wine glasses bearing the faint smudges of lips. The room, with its high ceilings and gilt-framed mirrors, seemed to hold its breath, as if aware of the tragedy that had unfolded in its shadow. Japp, his coat slung over a chair, looked up from a notebook filled with hurried scrawls. "Poirot, Miss Marple, you're back just in time. I've been talking to Mrs. Baines again, and she's given me a clearer picture of the dinner. Thought you'd want to hear it straight." Poirot, his eyes scanning the room with meticulous care, nodded. "Excellent, mon ami. The dinner, it is the prelude to our drama. Every word, every gesture, may hold the key to Dr. Langley's death and the manuscript's disappearance. Let us hear what the good Mrs. Baines has to say." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting needles resuming their quiet rhythm, her expression one of attentive curiosity. "Servants, Inspector," she said softly, "see more than they realize. In my village, it's often the cook or the maid who notices the truth behind a smile." Japp beckoned Mrs. Baines, who entered with a tray of tea, her starched apron crisp despite the late hour. Her face, lined with the weariness of a long day, bore the stoic resolve of one accustomed to serving without question. "Mrs. Baines," Japp said, "tell Monsieur Poirot and Miss Marple what you told me about last night's dinner. Don't leave out a thing." Mrs. Baines set the tray down, her hands steady, but her eyes troubled. "It was a grand affair, sir, as Dr. Langley liked. Roast beef, claret, and a trifle for dessert. He was in fine spirits, showing off that manuscript to his guests. Dr. Hale, Mr. Wells, and Lord Carver were there, all seated round this very table." Poirot leaned forward, his grey eyes gleaming. "And their mood, madame. Was it as festive as Dr. Langley's?" Mrs. Baines frowned, smoothing her apron. "Not entirely, sir. Dr. Hale was sharp-like, picking at Dr. Langley's claims about the manuscript. Said he was exaggerating its importance, that it needed more study. Mr. Wells was quiet, fidgety, kept dropping his fork. Lord Carver, though, he was all charm, offering to buy the manuscript outright. Dr. Langley laughed him off, said it wasn't for sale." Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze thoughtful. "An argument, then. In my village, I've seen how a dinner table can turn into a battlefield when pride is at stake." Mrs. Baines nodded. "It wasn't shouting, ma'am, but it was tense. Dr. Hale said something about the manuscript's authenticity, and Dr. Langley snapped back, said she was jealous. Mr. Wells tried to change the subject, asking about funding for his studies, but Dr. Langley cut him off, said he'd talk about it later. Lord Carver just smiled, like he was above it all, but I saw him watching that velvet box when Dr. Langley brought it out." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind piecing together the puzzle. "The velvet box, madame. When did Dr. Langley bring it to the table?" "After the trifle, sir," Mrs. Baines replied. "He had James fetch it from the study. Opened it right here. Let them all see the manuscript. Those old pages with gold lettering. They all leaned in, even Dr. Hale, though she looked more critical than awed." Poirot paced to the table, his fingers brushing the edge where a faint ring marked the wood, perhaps from a glass. "And the brandy, madame?" "When was it served?" Mrs. Baines hesitated, her brow furrowing. "After the manuscript was shown, sir. Dr. Langley asked James to bring the decanter from the study. He poured a glass for each of them, Dr. Hale, Mr. Wells, Lord Carver, and himself. They toasted the manuscript, though Dr. Hale barely sipped hers. Mr. Wells drank quick, like he wanted to be done with it. Lord Carver savoured his, made some remark about fine spirits deserving fine company. Miss Marple looked up, her eyes sharp. And after the toast, did they all leave together? Mrs. Baines shook her head. No, ma'am. Dr. Hale left first, said she had work to do. Mr. Wells followed soon after, looking peaky. Lord Carver stayed a bit, talking to Dr. Langley about art or some such. I was in the kitchen by then, clearing up with James. Dr. Langley said he'd stay in the study to work late. Poirot stopped pacing, his gaze fixed on the table. The decanter, madame. Was it left in the dining room or taken to the study? To the study, sir, Mrs. Baines said. James carried it there for Dr. Langley. I didn't see it after that. Poirot's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. And the glasses? Were they cleared, or did they remain? Mrs. Baines frowned, thinking. James cleared the dining room glasses, but Dr. Langley kept his. Said he'd finish it in the study. I didn't see the others after that. Miss Marple's knitting resumed, the soft click a counterpoint to the silence that followed. So only Dr. Langley's glass went to the study, she said, and only his was poisoned. That's a careful hand, Monsieur Poirot, one that knew its target. Poirot nodded, his fingers tapping his chin. Précisément, mademoiselle. The poison was not in the decanter, for the others drank without harm. It was in the glass, placed there after the toast, when Dr. Langley was alone, or so he thought. We must know who had access to that study after the dinner. Japp, who had been listening intently, scratched his head. That's the rub, Poirot. Mrs. Baines was in the kitchen, James was with her, and the guests all claim they left. But someone got to that glass. Poirot turned to Mrs. Baines. One thing more, madame. Did you see anyone in the corridor near the study as you worked? Mrs. Baines hesitated, then nodded slowly. I saw Lord Carver, sir, lingering by that painting he liked, but he was heading out, or so I thought. Dr. Hale and Mr. Wells were already gone by then. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Merci, madame. You have been most helpful. You may go, but remain at the hall, s'il vous plaît. As Mrs. Baines departed, Poirot turned to Japp and Miss Marple, his expression one of quiet intensity. The dinner, it casts long shadows. A rivalry aired, a student rebuffed, a collector denied. And yet, only one glass held death. The manuscript was the lure, but the poison was the act. Miss Marple's needles paused again. In St. Mary's Mead, I once knew a woman who poisoned her husband's tea, not because she hated him, but because she wanted something he wouldn't give. The manuscript, Monsieur Poirot. It's the heart of this, isn't it? Poirot inclined his head. Oui, mademoiselle. The manuscript is the prize, but the poison is the price. We must look closer at that study, at the moment when the glass was tainted. Someone lingered, someone acted. The shadows of the dinner will lead us to them. As they moved toward the library, Poirot's mind was a whirl of details. The tense exchanges at the table, the toast with untainted brandy, the solitary glass in the study, the crushed petal, the tarnished button, the chemical scent, the scratched table, all were threads in the tapestry, and Hercule Poirot was determined to weave them into the truth. Chapter 8. The Fingerprint's Tale. The library of Meadowbank Hall was steeped in the heavy silence of tragedy, its shelves of ancient tomes casting long shadows across the oak-panelled room where Dr. Edward Langley had met his untimely end. Hercule Poirot stood once more before the desk, his polished shoes reflecting the dim firelight, His grey eyes narrowed as he scrutinized the scene of the crime. Miss Jane Marple sat quietly in a corner, her knitting needles idle for once, her keen gaze following Poirot's meticulous movements. Inspector Japp, pacing near the sideboard, awaited the coroner's final report, which had arrived that morning, confirming cyanide as the cause of Langley's death. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the very walls held their breath, waiting for Poirot to unravel their secrets. Poirot's attention returned to the brandy glass, its crystal surface gleaming faintly under the chandelier's muted glow. He produced a magnifying glass from his pocket, its lens catching the light as he leaned over the desk, examining the solitary smudged fingerprint on the rim. The mark was frustratingly indistinct, blurred as if by a careless touch, yet beside it a trace of powdery residue clung to the crystal, a ghostly hint of the poison that had claimed Langley's life. "The fingerprint," Poirot murmured. "It is a whisper of truth, but not yet a shout. And this powder, it is our silent witness." Japp, his hands thrust into his coat pockets, grunted. "Cyanide, the coroner says. Quick, nasty stuff. Could have been slipped into the glass easy enough, but that print's no good to us if it's smudged. We've checked the decanter, clean as a whistle. It's the glass, Poirot, that's the key." Miss Marple's voice, soft but incisive, cut through the room. A single glass, poisoned, while the others drank without harm. That's no accident, Monsieur Poirot. In my village, I once knew a woman who poisoned only her husband's tea, though the pot served the whole family. Precision, that's what we're looking for. Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching as his mind worked. Précisément, mademoiselle. The poison was placed with care after the toast in the dining room when Dr. Langley was alone in the study. Or believed he was. We must know who had the opportunity, and who had the means. He turned to Japp. "Inspector, have you searched the belongings of our 3 suspects? Dr. Hale, Monsieur Wells, Lord Carver. They were all present, all with motives." Japp flipped open his notebook, his brow furrowed. "We've done a preliminary search. Dr. Hale's cottage has a small laboratory, plenty of chemicals, but no cyanide that we could find. Reagents for ink analysis, she says, and it checks out for her work. Wells's lodgings were a mess of books and papers, nothing suspicious, just a scholar's clutter. Lord Carver's townhouse, though. That's trickier. We sent a constable to London this morning. But that vial you mentioned, Poirot? The one on his table? Gone when we looked again. Carver claims he misplaced it. But I don't like the smell of that." Poirot's eyes gleamed, his fingers tapping his chin. "The vial, it vanishes like our manuscript. Most curious. A digestive tonic, he called it. Yet it is no longer there to speak for itself. We must press him on this, Japp." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed, her hands folding neatly in her lap. "In St. Mary's Mead, when something disappears, it's often because someone doesn't want it seen. That vial, Monsieur Poirot, it's a thread we must pull." Poirot moved to the sideboard, where the crystal decanter stood, its amber contents untouched since the fatal night. He lifted the stopper, inhaling deeply, confirming what Mrs. Baines had implied. The brandy was untainted. "The poison was in the glass alone," he said, "delivered with precision. This was no act of impulse, but of calculation. We must reconstruct the moments after the dinner." Japp nodded, consulting his notes. "Mrs. Baines says Hale left first, around 10, followed by Wells. Carver lingered, seen near the study by the footman, James, admiring that painting. Langley stayed behind, working late. The glass was his, taken from the dining room to the study after the toast. Poirot's gaze returned to the velvet-lined box, its emptiness a mute accusation. "The manuscript was taken without force," he said. "The box was unlocked, the key in Langley's desk drawer. Someone knew this, or found it by chance. Opportunity, motive, means. These we must align." He knelt by the fireplace, where the singed scrap of paper he had found earlier lay in an envelope. Examining it again, he noted its charred edges, the faint trace of script too burned to read. "This paper," he said, "was it burned deliberately, or was it merely careless? It is another whisper in our puzzle." Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice thoughtful. "In my village, a burned letter often means someone wished to hide its contents. But sometimes it's a distraction, meant to draw the eye from the truth." Japp scratched his head. "We've got men searching the grounds again, Poirot, but that wet earth outside the window's given us nothing. No footprints, no signs of entry. Looks like the killer was inside the hall all along." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "Inside, yes. The dinner's shadows linger here. Dr. Hale's rivalry, Wells' desperation, Carver's desire, each had a moment to act. But the fingerprint, the powder, the missing vial, they point to one who moved with care." He turned to Japp. "Inspector, arrange for the suspect's belongings to be searched more thoroughly, especially Lord Carver's collection in London. The manuscript may yet be found, hidden among his treasures. And the vial. Its absence is as telling as its presence would have been." Japp nodded, scribbling a note. "I'll get on it. But that fingerprint, Poirot, it's too smudged to match. We're stuck there." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet confidence. "Not stuck, mon ami. The fingerprint is a clue, even in its imperfection. It tells us someone touched the glass, perhaps in haste, perhaps to obscure their mark. The powder beside it, cyanide, I suspect, confirms the method. We are close, Japp, very close." Miss Marple folded her hands, her gaze steady. "The truth is like a tapestry, Monsieur Poirot. Each thread, the fingerprint, the vial, the burned paper, leads us closer to the pattern. But we must be patient, for the final stitch is yet to come." Poirot inclined his head, his mind a whirl of details. The smudged print, the chemical scent on Hale's coat, the bruise on Wells's wrist, the vanished vial in Carver's townhouse. "Patience, mademoiselle, and the little grey cells. They will not fail us. Let us prepare to confront our suspects again, for the truth is stirring in the shadows." As they left the library, the weight of the unsolved crime pressed upon them, but Poirot's resolve was unshaken. The fingerprint's tale was incomplete, but its whispers, combined with the other clues, would soon reveal the hand that had poisoned the glass and stolen the manuscript. Chapter 9. The Hidden Motive. The library of Meadowbank Hall, with its towering shelves and lingering air of tragedy, served as the stage for Hercule Poirot's next move in unravelling the mystery of Dr. Edward Langley's death and the theft of the priceless manuscript. The late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting a golden glow over the oak-panelled room, where the three suspects, Dr. Margaret Hale, Timothy Wells, and Lord Reginald Carver, sat in uneasy silence. Inspector Japp stood by the door, his notebook at the ready, while Miss Jane Marple occupied a corner chair, her knitting needles still, her eyes sharp as they observed the gathering. Poirot, at the centre of the room, stood with the quiet authority of a conductor before an orchestra, his grey eyes gleaming with the certainty of a man who had begun to see the pattern in the chaos. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice calm but commanding, "we are here to confront a crime most heinous, a murder by poison and a theft of a treasure. Dr. Langley lies dead, the manuscript is gone, and yet the truth, it begins to emerge from the shadows. Hercule Poirot will now reveal the threads that lead to the heart of this mystery." Dr. Hale's lips tightened, her hands clasped rigidly in her lap, her scholarly demeanour a shield against the accusation in Poirot's tone. Timothy Wells fidgeted, his bruised wrist hidden beneath his sleeve, his eyes darting nervously to the empty velvet box on the desk. Lord Carver lounged with studied ease, his silver cane across his knees, but his fingers betrayed a faint tremor as they toyed with his watch chain. The room was a tableau of tension, each suspect a piece in Poirot's intricate puzzle. Miss Marple's voice, soft but piercing, broke the silence. "In my village, Monsieur Poirot, I've seen how motives hide behind smiles. A jealous heart, a desperate soul, a greedy hand. Each leaves a mark if one knows where to look." Poirot nodded, his moustache twitching as he paced before the desk. "Précisément, mademoiselle. Let us examine the motives one by one and see where the marks lead. Dr. Hale, your rivalry with Dr. Langley was no secret. His claim to the manuscript's discovery overshadowed your work, a wound to your pride. You spoke of his carelessness, his arrogance. Did this resentment drive you to act?" Dr. Hale's eyes flashed behind her spectacles. "I resented his ego, yes, but I didn't kill him. My work is my life, Monsieur Poirot. Murder would ruin me as surely as it did him. I left the hall at 10, as I told you, and went to my cottage. I had no part in this." Poirot's gaze shifted to Timothy. "Monsieur Wells, a young scholar facing ruin. Dr. Langley threatened to fail you for plagiarism, a blow to your future. Desperation. It can make a man bold. Did you see the manuscript as a way to redeem yourself, or perhaps to punish your mentor?" Timothy's voice cracked, his hands twisting his handkerchief. "I didn't touch him. I was scared, yes, but I didn't poison his glass. I left early, went to my lodgings. The manuscript, I admired it, but I'd never steal it." Poirot turned to Lord Carver, his eyes narrowing. "And you, Monsieur le Lord, a collector whose desire for the manuscript burned brightly. You offered a fortune, yet, Doctor. Langley refused. You were seen near the study, lingering by a painting. Did you enter, perhaps, to make one final offer, and, when refused, to act?" Carver's smile was thin, his voice smooth but edged. "You weave a fine tale, Monsieur Poirot, but I'm no murderer. I wanted the manuscript, true, but I left Langley alive. I returned to London, as my butler can confirm. You've no proof against me." Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, his voice rising with quiet intensity. "Proof, monsieur. It is in the details, the smudged fingerprint on the glass, the powdery residue of cyanide, the missing vial from your townhouse. Let us reconstruct the night. The dinner was tense. Dr. Hale's challenge, Monsieur Wells's plea, your offer, Lord Carver. After the toast, the guests dispersed, but Dr. Langley took his glass to the study, where he worked alone. Or so he thought. Japp, leaning forward, interjected, "The glass, Poirot? That's the crux. Only Langley's was poisoned. Someone got to it after the toast." Poirot nodded, his eyes never leaving the suspects. "Exactement, Inspector. The poison was not in the decanter, for all drank safely. It was in the glass, placed there in the study. Dr. Hale, you left first, but your cottage is near. Time enough to return unseen. Monsieur Wells, your lodgings are close, and your bruise suggests a struggle, perhaps with your conscience or another. Lord Carver, you lingered near the study door, and the vial, your tonic, is conveniently missing. Carver's composure wavered, his fingers tightening on his cane. You're grasping, Poirot. That vial was a digestive aid, misplaced, nothing more. Miss Marple's voice was gentle, but incisive. In St. Mary's Mead, a missing item often speaks louder than one found. That vial, Lord Carver, and the scratch on your table. Haste leaves such marks, doesn't it? Poirot's smile was faint, but relentless. Let us consider the manuscript. It was taken from an unlocked box, a theft of opportunity. Dr. Hale, your knowledge of its value was academic, not possessive. Monsieur Wells, your desperation was personal, not material. But Lord Carver, your collection is your passion. I propose that you entered the study after the others left, offering one last deal. When Dr. Langley refused, you poisoned his glass, waiting for him to collapse. Then you took the manuscript, hiding it among your treasures. Dr. Hale's voice was sharp. That's absurd. If anyone had motive, it was Wells. His career was on the line. Timothy's face reddened. Me? I didn't even stay long enough. Carver was the one obsessed with that manuscript. Carver stood, his cane tapping the floor. Enough! You've no evidence, Poirot. This is speculation. Nothing more. Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the protests. Speculation? None. It is logic. The fingerprint, smudged to hide its owner, suggests intent. The powder on the glass confirms cyanide. The burned paper in the fireplace, the missing book from the shelf, the crushed petal in the corridor, all point to a careful hand, one accustomed to control. Lord Carver, your vial, your presence, your desire, they align too perfectly. Japp stepped forward, his eyes on Carver. We're searching your townhouse again, my lord. If that manuscript's there, we'll find it. Carver's face paled, but he said nothing, his silence a crack in his polished facade. Poirot's gaze softened, but his resolve was iron. The truth, it is near. One of you poisoned the glass. One of you took the manuscript. The little grey cells, they do not rest until the hidden motive is revealed. Miss Marple folded her hands, her eyes meeting Poirot's. In my village, the truth often comes when the guilty believe they've won. Patience, Monsieur Poirot, will show us the way. As the suspects were dismissed to await further questioning, Poirot's mind churned with the details: the smudged print, the vanished vial, the bruised wrist, the chemical scent. The hidden motive was close, and Hercule Poirot would not relent until it stood in the light. Chapter 10. The Collector's Confession. The drawing-room of Meadowbank Hall was charged with an electric tension, its heavy curtains drawn against the encroaching night, the fire casting flickering shadows across the faces of those gathered within. Hercule Poirot stood before the mantel, his small frame radiating an authority that silenced the room. Inspector Japp flanked him, his expression grim, a telegram from London clutched in his hand. Miss Jane Marple sat near the window, her knitting untouched, her eyes sharp as they observed the three suspects, Dr. Margaret Hale, Timothy Wells, and Lord Reginald Carver, who sat in uneasy anticipation. The air was thick with the weight of impending revelation, as if the very walls of the old manor knew the truth was about to be laid bare. Poirot's grey eyes swept over the trio, his moustache perfectly symmetrical, his voice calm but relentless. Mesdames et messieurs, we stand at the precipice of truth. Dr. Edward Langley was poisoned, his manuscript stolen, and the threads of this crime, motive, opportunity, means, have woven a tapestry that points to one among you. Hercule Poirot does not guess, he deduces, and now the deduction is complete. Japp cleared his throat, holding up the telegram. Before you start, Poirot, we've had word from London. My men searched Lord Carver's townhouse again, and they found something, a 12th century manuscript, hidden inside a hollowed-out Bible in his collection. It matches the description of Langley's chronicle. A murmur rippled through the room. Dr. Hale's lips parted in surprise, Timothy's eyes widened, and Lord Carver's hand tightened on his silver cane, his face a mask of controlled composure. Poirot's gaze fixed on him, unyielding. Lord Carver, the manuscript is found, and it speaks against you. But let us unravel the events of that fatal night, step by step, to see how it came to this. Miss Marple leaned forward, her voice soft but piercing. In my village, Lord Carver, I've seen how greed can twist a heart. A man once stole a neighbour's prize marrow, not for need, but for want. Your want for that manuscript was great, wasn't it? Carver's smile was thin, his voice steady but strained. I wanted it, yes, but I've told you. I didn't kill Langley. The manuscript in my collection? Perhaps a misunderstanding. I acquire many items, some of uncertain provenance. Poirot raised a hand, his tone cutting through Carver's deflection. No, monsieur, there is no misunderstanding. Let us reconstruct. The dinner was tense. Dr. Hale challenged Langley's claims, Monsieur Wells pleaded for his future, and you, Lord Carver, offered a fortune for the manuscript, which was refused. After the toast, the guests dispersed. Dr. Hale left at 10, Monsieur Wells soon after. You, however, lingered, seen by the footman James near the study, admiring a painting. Carver's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Poirot continued, pacing slowly. You entered the study, I propose, to make one final offer. Langley refused again, his pride in the manuscript unyielding. But you, a collector who covets what is rare, could not accept defeat. You carried a vial, your digestive tonic, containing cyanide, easily concealed. As Langley turned to his papers, you slipped the poison into his glass, knowing he would drink alone. When he collapsed, you took the manuscript from its unlocked box and fled, hiding it among your treasures. Dr. Hale's voice was sharp. That's plausible, Poirot. Carver was obsessed. I saw how his eyes lit up when Langley showed us the manuscript. Timothy nodded, his voice trembling. He stayed longer than us. I was gone by then, I swear. Carver rose, his cane tapping the floor, his composure cracking. This is preposterous. You've no proof I poisoned him. The vial? Misplaced. The manuscript? I acquired it legally, perhaps from another source. Poirot's smile was cold, his eyes gleaming with certainty. Legally, monsieur. No, the manuscript was found in your possession, hidden with care. The vial, missing from your table, was noted by my own eyes. The scratch on that table, the crushed petal in the corridor, the smudged fingerprint on the glass. These are not coincidences. They are the marks of a man who acted with intent. Japp stepped forward, his voice gruff. We've sent for the vial's contents to be analyzed, Carver. If it's cyanide, you're done for. Carver's face paled, his hand trembling on his cane. For a moment, silence hung heavy, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Then, as if the weight of Poirot's words had shattered his resolve, he sank back into his chair, his voice low. "I didn't mean to kill him," he said, almost a whisper. "I only wanted the manuscript. Langley was a fool, hoarding it like a trophy. I offered him everything, money, prestige, but he refused. I brought the cyanide to persuade him, to make him ill, to give me time to take it. But the dose was too strong. He collapsed, and I panicked. I took the manuscript and left." Poirot's voice was soft but unrelenting. "You poisoned a man, monsieur, and stole his treasure. Panic does not absolve murder." Miss Marple's eyes were sad but resolute. "In St. Mary's Mead, I've seen how desire can blind a man to right and wrong. You wanted that manuscript more than you valued a life, Lord Carver." Carver's head bowed, his voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for him to die. I only wanted what was mine, by right of appreciation." Japp signalled to a constable at the door. "That's enough, Carver. You're under arrest for the murder of Edward Langley and the theft of the manuscript." As the constable led Carver away, his silver cane clattering to the floor, Dr. Hale and Timothy exchanged stunned glances. Poirot turned to them, his expression sombre. "The truth, it is not always pleasant, but it is necessary. Dr. Hale, your rivalry was real, but your hands are clean. Monsieur Wells, your fear was genuine, but it did not lead to murder. The collector's desire was the poison in this tale." Japp clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "You've done it again, Poirot. That manuscript's back where it belongs, and we've got our man." Miss Marple folded her hands, her eyes meeting Poirot's. "The little details, Monsieur Poirot. The vial, the petal, the fingerprint. They told the story, didn't they?" Poirot inclined his head, his moustache curving slightly. "Why, mademoiselle, the little grey cells, they see what others miss. The tapestry is complete, and justice will be served." As the room emptied, leaving only the echo of Carver's confession, Poirot stood by the fire, his mind already turning to the next challenge. The collector's confession had closed one chapter, but the truth, as always, was his greatest prize. Chapter 11. The Village's Wisdom. The morning sun broke through the lingering mist of St. Mary's Mead, casting a soft golden light over the village's thatched cottages and winding lanes. Hercule Poirot and Miss Jane Marple strolled along the path from Meadowbank Hall, their footsteps crunching on the gravel, the air crisp with the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke. The arrest of Lord Reginald Carver the previous evening had sent ripples through the village, whispers of scandal already weaving through the tea shops and churchyard. Yet, for Poirot, the case was not quite closed. The little grey cells demanded reflection, and Miss Marple's quiet wisdom offered a perfect companion for such a task. Poirot adjusted his scarf, his polished shoes gleaming despite the morning dew. "Mademoiselle Marple," he said, his voice tinged with admiration, "your village, it is a microcosm of human nature, no? In its simplicity, it reveals complexities that even London cannot match. The confession of Lord Carver, it was the desire for possession that undid him. Yet I sense you saw this truth from the beginning." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles, her shawl drawn tightly against the chill. "Oh, Monsieur Poirot, I've lived long enough to know that greed and pride are the same in a village as in a city. In St. Mary's Mead, I once knew a man who stole a neighbour's prize pig, not for hunger, but because he couldn't bear another's success. Lord Carver's desire for that manuscript was no different. It consumed him, until he forgot right from wrong. They paused by a low stone wall where a blackbird sang from a bare hawthorn tree. Poirot's gaze drifted to the distant spire of the village church, his mind replaying the details of the case: the smudged fingerprint, the powdery residue, the vanished vial, the crushed petal, the tarnished button. "The tapestry of this crime," he said, "was woven with care, but it was your insight, mademoiselle, that helped me see the pattern. You spoke of human nature, of the marks left by guilt and fear. Without your village wisdom, I might have overlooked the subtleties." Miss Marple smiled, her hands clasped over her knitting bag. "You're too kind, Monsieur Poirot. You see, in a village, we notice the little things: a glance, a hesitation, a misplaced word. Lord Carver's polish was his mask, but his eyes betrayed him, just as young Timothy's fear and Dr. Hale's pride told their own stories. You saw those too, with your little grey cells." Poirot chuckled softly, his moustache twitching. "The little grey cells, they are relentless, but they thrive on collaboration. Your observation of the crushed petal, the key, scratched table, they were threads I might not have pulled without your nudge. And yet, I wonder, did you suspect Carver from the start?" Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression thoughtful. "I suspected his heart, Monsieur Poirot. In St. Mary's Mead, I've seen how a collector's passion can turn to obsession. When Mrs. Baines spoke of his lingering by the study, and you mentioned that missing vial, I thought of a man in my village who hid stolen jewels in a book, much like Carver hid the manuscript. But I needed your logic to be certain." They resumed their walk, passing the village green, where children played and a postman cycled by with a nod. Poirot's mind turned to the suspects left behind. "Dr. Hale," he said. "Her rivalry was fierce, but her ambition was for recognition, not possession. Monsieur Wells, his fear was real, but it was fear of failure, not of guilt. Carver, however, his desire was a fire that burned too brightly." Miss Marple nodded, her voice soft but firm. "And fire, Monsieur Poirot, leaves ashes. His confession was those ashes. Regret. But too late. In my village, I've seen how remorse comes only when the deed is done." Poirot's eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. "Oui, mademoiselle. The confession was the final stitch in our tapestry. The manuscript is recovered, the poisoner unmasked, and justice will follow. Yet I confess, your village has taught me something. There is a clarity in its simplicity that sharpens the mind." They reached the gate of Miss Marple's cottage, its rose bushes bare, but promising spring's return. She paused, her hand on the latch. "You're welcome back any time, Monsieur Poirot. St. Mary's Mead may seem quiet, but it has its secrets, and I suspect you'd find them as intriguing as I do." Poirot bowed, his hat in hand. "I shall return, mademoiselle, if only to share a cup of tea and the wisdom of your village. For now, London calls, and Hercule Poirot must answer. But I leave with gratitude for your insight." As Miss Marple disappeared into her cottage, Poirot turned toward the station, his mind already anticipating the next puzzle. The village's wisdom had illuminated the shadows of Meadowbank Hall, and the truth, as always, had prevailed through the meticulous order of his little grey cells. Chapter 12. The Manuscript's Return. The morning light spilled over the rolling hills of St. Mary's Mead, bathing Meadowbank Hall in a serene glow that seemed to cleanse the manor of its recent shadows. Hercule Poirot stood in the library, where the tragedy of Dr. Edward Langley's death had unfolded. his polished shoes reflecting the polished oak floor. The velvet-lined box, once empty, now cradled the recovered 12th century chronicle, its parchment pages glowing with the faint sheen of gold ink. Inspector Japp, his coat slightly less rumpled than usual, oversaw the final preparations to secure the manuscript, while Dr. Margaret Hale, reinstated, as its guardian, stood nearby, her expression a blend of relief and resolve. Timothy Wells, cleared of suspicion, hovered at the edge of the room, his ink-stained fingers clutching a notebook, his eyes bright with renewed purpose. Poirot's gaze lingered on the manuscript, his grey eyes tracing its delicate script. "A treasure, non?" he said, his voice soft but resonant. "It has cost a life, yet it endures, a testament to history and to the truth we have uncovered." Japp nodded, his notebook tucked away for once. "Thanks to you, Poirot. That manuscript's back where it belongs, and Carver's in custody, facing justice. The coroner's report sealed it. Cyanide, just as you thought, and the manuscript in his townhouse was the clincher." Dr. Hale stepped forward, her severe bun softened by a rare hint of humility. "Monsieur Poirot, I misjudged you. I thought your methods theatrical, but you've saved this chronicle from oblivion. I'll ensure it's protected now, locked in a vault, not a flimsy box." Poirot inclined his head, his moustache curving slightly. "Madame, your dedication to scholarship is your redemption. Guard this treasure well, for it belongs not to one, but to all who seek knowledge." Timothy approached, his voice hesitant but earnest. "Mr. Poirot, I owe you everything. If you hadn't believed me, I'd still be under suspicion. I'm rewriting my thesis, properly, this time." Dr. Hales agreed to supervise. Poirot's eyes twinkled with approval. "Monsieur Wells, the path to wisdom is paved with mistakes, but only if one learns from them. You have a future, if you choose it." Miss Jane Marple, who had entered quietly, stood by the window, her shawl draped over her shoulders, her knitting bag at her side. "In St. Mary's Mead," she said, her voice gentle but Jesus, "a scholar's ambition, a student's desperation, a collector's greed, each played their part. But it was your little grey cells, Monsieur Poirot, that restored order." Poirot bowed slightly, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. "And your village wisdom, Mademoiselle Marple. Together, we have ensured this manuscript's return to its rightful place." As the constables prepared to transport the manuscript to a secure archive in Oxford, Poirot took a final look at the library, the desk where Langley fell, the sideboard with its untainted decanter, the fireplace with its singed paper. The clues, the smudged fingerprint, the crushed petal, the tarnished button, the vanished vial, had all pointed to the truth, and now the room felt cleansed, its secrets laid bare. Japp clapped Poirot on the shoulder. "You're off to London, then? Another case waiting, I'll bet." Poirot smiled, adjusting his hat. "Always, mon ami. The world is full of puzzles, and Hercule Poirot is never idle. But for now the manuscript is safe, and order is restored." As he stepped out into the crisp morning, Poirot's mind was already turning to the next challenge. The manuscript's return marked the end of this mystery, but the little grey cells, ever restless, awaited the next thread to unravel.